There's this misconception that the Steam Deck is an always online device, that to enjoy any of your games from your Steam library, you have to be online. But this isn't true. It's time we talk about taking your Steam Deck outside and internationally as well. Welcome back to the Steam Deck Masterclass. This is volume 17. I understand that most gamers are indoor people, but for people that like to take their games outside, this video is for you. But before that, if you like this video or any other video I make, please like, subscribe, and share with all of your friends. Spreading the good gospel of high-tech low-life lets the YouTube algorithm know that I'm doing well. I'm sure a lot of my audience likes to play their Steam Deck indoors, and that's totally fine. But of course, Valve has been slowly improving the offline experience for the Steam Deck. Every now and then there are updates that improve the viability of offline mode. So typically when you take your Steam Deck outside of your house, you probably just take your Steam Deck with you. You probably just leave the Wi-Fi on and you take it outside of your house. And at times it will work, but once you restart your Steam Deck, there will be issues unless you reconnect to the internet somehow. While this does work on occasion, and I'm kind of guilty of taking my Steam Deck outside of my house sometimes, if you're gonna say take your Steam Deck to a remote location for a very long time, like, I don't know, maybe you're going into a cabin in the woods without Wi-Fi for a very long time, or perhaps you're gonna go on a boat for a long time. It's recommended that you turn on offline mode while still connected to the internet. This way you encounter very few issues. When in offline mode, Steam doesn't bother checking anything. It doesn't bother checking the internet to see if you're connected to it or if there's any updates. Whereas if you just turn off the Wi-Fi, Steam will still do so for whatever reason. Yes, so for my road warriors out there, or those that like to take vacations, or they like to travel, or perhaps they have to go on business travel, go into offline mode before you disconnect from the internet. Most typical Steam games will work just fine offline, but there will always be some exceptions to the rule. And no, I'm not talking about those always online games that are strictly multiplayer. You know the types. I'm talking more about games with some sort of DRM, the most common of which is Denuvo. I'm not going to go into too much detail on what Denuvo is, but what I will tell you is that Denuvo is a form of DRM that occasionally phones home. Many modern AAA titles do come with Denuvo built in, and while it varies from game to game, Denuvo has been observed to make games run worse. And yes, this includes running worse on not just your regular computer, but also your Steam Deck as well. Now, for something like Dragon's Dogma 2, which does not run well on Steam Deck, I don't believe Denuvo is the only culprit that makes Dragon's Dogma 2 run terribly on modern systems. I do think it's a combination of that and perhaps just the game not being the most optimized for PC. But the most relevant side effect of Denuvo to this video, of course, is how Denuvo occasionally phones home. Now, I don't know the exact frequency at which Denuvo phones home, and neither does anyone else, but from what I understand, it's on a per game basis. And from what I understand, every now and then it'll phone home, and if it can't contact the servers, then the game stops working. You also have to be online when you first run the game in question. It'll detect that your Wi-Fi is off, or perhaps maybe you're on offline mode, and it'll tell you that you need to connect to Steam online to play the game first. So yes, you can play games with Denuvo offline, but you have to be online first when you first start the game, and the game may work for a week. It may work for a month. Heck, it may even work for a couple of months. There's no telling how many days or weeks it'll work, but eventually it'll try to phone home and it can't connect to the internet, so it'll stop working. That's just the way it is. Another major detriment is that Denuvo restricts how many times you can install a game onto a different system. Now, this is to prevent people from installing it on, say, more than 5 different computers so that people can play. But this also poses a serious issue for those on Linux or Steam Deck, for those that like to switch up different Proton versions to see if the game runs any better. If you switch your version of Proton for a Denuvo game, then it'll count as installing on a separate computer, and you can only switch versions of Proton so many times before the game locks you out. And because it also counts as running the game for the first time on a new install, you have to be online when you're switching versions of Proton for a Denuvo game. So I will say this, Denuvo is a huge pain for people that like to play video games, period. Thankfully, Steam does tell you when a game has Denuvo built in, so if you don't want to buy a game with Denuvo, you don't have to. But for those of you that still want to buy a game, then just heed my words and be careful. If you want to play a game with Proton, then be online when you first launch the game, and just pray that you're not offline for too long, okay? So I think that about covers it for general Denuvo titles, but there are specific quirks with specific titles that may have online functionality. Some games do behave differently while offline, and if you want to know more about it, I would recommend doing the research on whatever game you're interested in. That said, most games have little to no issue going offline period, so that shouldn't be a major concern. As for both playtime and achievements, offline playtime unfortunately is not tracked or synced when you go back online. So you could play, say, 20 hours of a Steam game offline, but once you go back online, unless you were still playing the game when you go back online, your 20 hours or so are gone. It's unfortunate that your playtime goes away as soon as you go back online. I know this is like a low priority issue, but I do wish Valve would fix this. And on the topic of achievements, some games do honor your offline achievements, and others don't. I don't know which ones do and which ones don't. There's no way of knowing. There's no database. I have no way of knowing either. All I know is that some games do let you get achievements offline and others don't. But in my experience, most of the indie games I've played let you get achievements offline, so that's not a huge deal to me. So everything we talked about today pertains to good old-fashioned Steam games. But what about, say, other games you may be playing? For example, what about emulators? Well, emulators work offline. Like, yeah, this sounds like the most obvious thing ever. Like, if you're playing a game that doesn't require internet connectivity, then you should be able to play it offline, right? But a lot of people didn't know that. As for stuff like the Hero Games Launcher, most Epic games seem to work just fine offline, but the Hero Games Launcher can actually go into a sort of offline mode. It's kind of similar to what the Steam Deck's offline mode is, so don't be afraid to leverage that as well. And of course, GOG titles don't have any form of DRM whatsoever. And yes, the Hero Games Launcher also supports GOG titles. You don't need to go into offline mode for most of them, but it's still a good practice. So I think I've covered most of the common games and game types and game stores that you'll want to play offline. Who would have thunk it, right? Who would have wanted to take their portable system outside of their house and play it on like an airplane? I do, because long ass flights are completely unbearable without something to do. So I always load up my Steam Deck with a bunch of different games that I know will work offline. And it's never failed me. I took my original LCD Steam Deck to Italy about a year ago, and I recently took my limited edition OLED on a cruise. While obviously you're not traveling to play video games, or at least in my case I wasn't traveling to play video games, the Steam Deck has made public transit less of a nuisance. If you like this video, please press the like button and check out our other videos, and if you like those other videos as well, be sure to press the subscribe button and share the good gospel of high-tech lowlife with your friends. Furthermore, we have a community Discord for enlightened individuals such as you. And if you wish to further support high-tech lowlife, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Links in the description.